casinos in Puerto Rico are in San Juan, because that's the biggest city there. There's might be a casino in Mayagüez and a couple other towns in Puerto Rico, but there's a host at the time, and even today, there's a whole slew of casinos in San Juan, and that's where I got introduced to gambling. And it turns out that because of my background in magic and in card tricks, and to do card tricks, you have to understand how a deck of cards work. You have to know you have to be able to memorize sometimes different card tricks or different sequences. And you also realize, Darcy doesn't like me saying that, but a deck of cards has a memory. So, and what I mean by that, if you take a pair of dice and you roll it down the table, that pair of dice does not remember what it did the last roll. Although some people believe in winning streaks and all of that, but that's just superstition. So it's an independent roll. So each time you roll the dice, it doesn't know where it rolls next time. So the same number could come up several times in a row. A different number could come up, and just because one number comes up 10 times doesn't mean the next time it couldn't come up the 11th time, or vice versa. But cards are different. If you have 52 cards in the deck and all of the aces are gone, you can't have a blackjack. It's impossible. And a blackjack is the best hand a player can get, because it pays 3 for 2. No other card combination plays 3 for 2. Everything else plays equal money, and you either beat the dealer or you lose to the dealer. So, but the advantage of the blackjack is, if you get a blackjack, you get paid 50% more. If the dealer wins a blackjack, he only gets your money. So right. If you could do that all day, if he could win one and you could win one all day long and do nothing else, by the end of the day, the player would have a fortune of money. So that's what it means when you say that the deck of cards has a memory. And if there's a lot of 10s in a deck, which includes 10, Jack, Queen, King, because in blackjack they're all worth 10. If there's a lot of 10s in the deck, if you have a bad hand, like a 10 and a 6 or a 10 and a 5, you don't have to hit the deck. But if, hit the hand. But if the dealer has a 10 and a 5, the rules of the game, he has to hit. So since he's forced to do that, if there's a lot of 10s in the deck, it favors the player. By the opposite token, if there's a lot of small cards in the deck, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6, the 5 being the most valuable, I'll tell you why in a minute. But if there's a lot of small cards and the dealer has to hit from 12 to 16, he's less likely to break. So that's when the odds of the game shifts to the dealer. And the reason the 5 is the most valuable is because the dealer has to hit between 12 and 16. And the 5 is the only card that will make, with one card, a 12, it'll make it a 17, so he won't bust. And if he has a 16, it'll make it a 21. So that's the most valuable card to the dealer. If there's a lot of 2s in the deck, it's not as valuable, because if he has 12, it'll only give him 14, and he has to hit again. But of course, if he has 16 and he gets a 2, he has an 18. So that gives you a brief rundown in how blackjack, how the odds shift as the game is playing from hand to hand.
I'm going to have to rewind this and write stuff down, man. That was a serious lesson. What about the 5-card draw? That doesn't beat a blackjack if you draw 5?
I didn't hear what you said.
If you get 5 cards and you don't hit blackjack.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what's called, it's kind of a side bet. It's not a side bet, but all casinos don't have that.
Oh, okay.
Different casinos have different rules like that and different side bets. The only side bet, though, that is valuable to someone that knows the composition of the deck is what they call insurance. And what insurance means is if the dealer has an ace up, you can bet half your money, and if he has an ace up, it's called insurance, so that you insure your bet not to lose. And if he has a blackjack, he wins your money, but then he pays you the insurance money, which means it's a standoff. You don't lose or make any money. And that's another one where someone that's paying attention to the cards, if more than half the cards in the deck, I think about, I don't know the number, I'm going to guess about a third of the cards are tens. So taking insurance is a sucker bet because it's only pays 50% more. But if there's more than half the deck has tens in it, and you know that as a card counter, then it does pay to take insurance. And usually when you're putting up your big money as a card player, by counting the deck, when you're putting up your big money is when there are a lot of tens in the deck because it favors you because you can bust out. So that's a great advantage for you to be able to take insurance at that time.
See, I've never done insurance because I never understood it. So
Yeah, well,
with you being so good and becoming a pro blackjack player, what rules did they change over time because of you?
yeah, well, what happened is there was a guy that wrote I was playing blackjack in the 60s, and then I had a system of my own, which I devised on my own because of, like I told you, some of the details. But a guy by the name of Ed Thorpe in the late 60s came out with a book called Beat the Dealer. And in that, he figured out through computers this information about how the deck shifts, and he wrote a book that eventually became a $1 million, multi-million seller called Beat the Dealer. And in the first edition, he explained this mostly building around the tens, counting the tens as against the other cards. And Henry Morgan was a big comedian at the time, and when he wrote the book, Henry Morgan became interested in this, and they both came down to Puerto Rico to play. And he was consistently losing money. And so the pit boss told him, one of the pit bosses, one of the casinos, jokingly said to him, if you want to know how to play blackjack, go see that guy over there. And they sent him over to where I was playing. And when I was playing blackjack in Puerto Rico, if you're a big, first of all, the great thing about Puerto Rico, not like other places, is in Puerto Rico, the government, it's a subsidiary of the United States, but it's independent of the United States. And in Puerto Rico, the government itself sets the rules and the conditions for gambling. So it's not like Vegas where it can shift from time to time according to what the Vegas Gambling Commission wants, because they only protect the house. In Puerto Rico, it was set up so it didn't protect the house or the gambler, but they didn't want anybody to take unfair advantage. So you couldn't change the rules in Puerto Rico. However, it's good if you're doing well as a gambler, is not to be able to perceive to be an advantage player. Otherwise, in any game, you're going to be, at least in the United States, you're going to be thrown out. But even so, it pays not to be recognized. So what I would do is I would get up they only had gambling in the dark, after the day, not in the beginning of the day. Now it might be all day long, I don't know. And the reason for that is, again, the government wanted to protect the people, so they didn't want the gambling casinos open until after 5 o'clock, because most people worked 9 to 5. So the casinos were only open in the evening in that period, and I think they were closed one day a week, maybe Sunday, because, again, it's a very religious community, and they abide by their own rules. So at any rate, I would also, however, disguise what I was doing. I never let anybody know how much I was winning. I would secret, because I was a magician. I knew how to palm chicks, so I would palm them off and I would hide them in my pocket so they didn't realize how much I was winning. I would dress very shabbily, not in a distasteful way, because you didn't want people to move, be repulsed by you. And I drove around in a motor scooter. You can do that in Puerto Rico because You have one shower a day, 3 in the afternoon. It lasts for 10 minutes. Most of the rest of the time, it's beautiful and sunny. So I told people I couldn't even afford a car. I actually had 2 cars, but I said I couldn't afford a car. And you don't want people to know how much money you're making. So even when Ed Thorpe came down to play, they didn't even make as expensive as the guy that wrote the book. The guy that I told you that they said to go watch me. When he came out with the second edition of his book after seeing me play, if you buy Beat the Deal since then, he's got about 10 or 20 pages devoted to me in the book. And he calls it, the section, he calls it Enter the Salmon. That's what they call me, the Salmon. Now, why they call me the Salmon is because a salmon, S-A-L-M-O-N, a salmon fish swims upstream against the current. So they call me Salmon because they figured I was trying to beat the system, and they figured it was not possible to beat the system. And also, unknown to a lot of people, unless you're a local Puerto Rican, Salmon also means, in Puerto Rican slang, what do you call it? Huh? In Puerto Rican slang, Salmon means a jerk. So they all,
wow, that's
so they
funny.
all considered me a jerk, and they called it a la larga in slang. What a la larga means, in the long run, I would lose the money back. So in order to not lose all my money back, what I did was the first $50,000 I made. By the way, that's all that Thorpe knew I made. He thought, because you minimize your winnings. The first $50,000, I bought a house for my mom and dad in Pennsylvania.
Aww.
With the idea that in case this is some wild and crazy fluke or something changes, I'm never going to give that money back. So I bought a house for my mom and dad in New York City, in New Jersey, and then I continued to build up my bankroll. And as I built up my bankroll, I got involved in other things. I ended up buying a Casa de Empeño, which is called a pawn shop. I became an owner in a pawn shop. I ended up buying opening up an art gallery in the most prime center of town in El San Juan, overlooking the bay, and people would come to the bay and look how beautiful it was. And right on that corner, I had an art gallery. So what I did,
And they thought you were the jerk. They thought you were losing all your stuff.
Well, yeah. So that's what. Well, I kept all of this kind of on the QT, but ultimately, as you alluded to, they would change the rules after I won what I would say would have been about $250,000. So they decided to change the rules in Blackjack, and that did happen around the country as well, in Las Vegas and other places. And they also went from, when I was playing Blackjack, they dealt two decks of cards in a shoe. They had a shoe because they knew that you could cheat by, if you held a deck in your hand, you could do what they call second dealing, and you could do peeking at the top card to know what's coming up. By the dealer could do that, and then if this was a card that would bust you, he would give it to you. If it was a 5 and he didn't want to give it to you, he would deal a second card, and that whatever it was less likely to help you. Or if he knew it was a 10 coming up next, and you had a 15, he would deal it to you and bust you. So that's the reason they use the shoe, although they have manufactured shoes that can cheat too, but generally not. But generally not. And
Right.
the thing is, the reason that is not preferred by professional cheats is the shoe you can get caught with. But if you're doing it in your hands, they can't catch you. I mean, they can't exactly prove it. But if they grab your shoe and take it to the district attorney, they can prove that you're cheating. So that gives you a little background on that.
Wow, we went down a whole rabbit hole, and the passion that you had for playing cards and talking about that, man, that's amazing. That is amazing, Dick.